eyewitnesstohistory.com. And it's just some background stuff. You can get on it. You know, it's a few pages. It's the burning of Rome, etc. And that is all primary source by Tacitus, okay? And so, and you can get on there, and on your left column, I mean, it just goes forever of different ones you can click on that you want to look at. So we've got enough of those for everyone to have one, okay? Then the second one that we have is on 12 Caesars, Suetonius. And this is Gutenberg Project. And you know, all of this is free, you know, you can get on. Just go to Google, type in Project Gutenberg, and you know, I'm giving you one of these too, so you can look at it. And you can read any, if you're so minded, you can read that primary source, you know, by Suetonius there. It's all of it. It's his poetry, it's his annals, it's everything. So anyway, thought we would give that to you in case you wanted to follow up on some of this. And on, particularly with the 12 Caesars handout that we're going to give you, you can get an idea of what it's like on the back. I've got one of these probably per couple or individual. So Noah also, when he's done here, he will hand those out. So that's it.
Talk nearly as long as you say. You also have coming out, remember for your film the other day, which we hadn't had a chance to talk about, we probably won't, they mentioned a woman who was a martyr at the end of the film, Perpetua, who was an actual person, obviously. She was 2nd or 3rd century, I forgot which. But anyway, she was a noble woman, pregnant, she just delivered a child. She's told to acknowledge the emperor in a God kind of way. She won't do it, so she goes to the arena. There is a, she wrote a work before she was killed, and I've printed off excerpted version of that. So if you want to read more about her, what happened before she went to the arena, and then she was slashed apart by gladiators. They had a net thrown over her to keep her quiet. But anyway, that's just for you to just kind of see more about her. These fascinating people, these amazing people who went to the wall, who took their faith to the wall. I don't know if I could do that. I can stand here and say, you know, if I'd been there, I would have done that too. Because it's real easy for me to stand here in the 21st century and say, you know, if I'd been there, I would have done that too. But I don't know. I hope I would have, but you know, I don't know. Some people didn't. Some people could not go to the wall. I'm not going to judge them accordingly. The people did. People did by the thousands. So these are extraordinary folks in terms of their faith. A couple other things. Some of you asked after the film, where did that come from? It came from this series here, so I ran off some info. Some of you, 3 or 4 of you asked about that, so if you were interested in the film series, that's the one that would be kind of Sunday school oriented, and the rest of it was just Western Civ, basically, mostly. But if you like the series, it's a good series, good history series. There's the info. I won't hand those out. I just ran off a few. Well, if you want one now, I have a few. If you want to grab one of those at the break, feel free. Thank you. And Noah, did you want to talk about books right now? No. Did you want to talk about books right now? Excuse me. Some of you asked about sources. Part of that's what you're getting in terms of primary sources from Deb. Remember, too, when you're talking about primary sources, I mean, we think it's easy to write history. It's not. Because inevitably, no matter what you're talking about, you will get different versions in terms of primary sources, and it's certainly the case with Roman history. Something as simple as just the assassination of Julius Caesar. There are different versions of that. Different things happened according to who wrote about it after the fact. How many times was he stabbed? How many people were up in front of him? Who said what? Did he fight back or not fight back? And just the discriminate. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. You cannot cite one source and let it ride. It won't work. So these are sometimes very complicated things to reconstruct, because I wasn't there, you weren't there, and even the people who were there typically are writing secondhand about it, and then different versions are going to be total. You know how that works. If we set you all down separately and said to you, okay, describe to me what happened at RoundUp. We get 80 to 100 different versions of what happened at RoundUp, but you all experience the same thing, sort of. That works. Okay? Okay. We don't have time to talk much about the film. Do you want to take a couple minutes to do that? I do want to come back to the crucifixion. I do want to come back to that. I just want to show you something here, because typically we think of the cross as what? As that.
Yes.
Our concept of the cross is it is a lowercase t. Okay, it has a top member, it has a cross member, and then of course the main member. Some may have been. There are different versions of this. What I want to show you is what was a very common type of cross at the time. This is obviously a miniature version. Okay, but typically, and I'm not saying Jesus was crucified this way. I'm saying in his time period, this is typical. Okay, you would have a main member, all right, usually about 8 feet tall, and then you'd have the cross member, literally in this case, the cross member that would be placed on top. It's called a tau cross, T-A-U, all right? If you want to see a little bit better concept of this, you can pick up Bill O'Reilly's book over there, and it'll show you a version on the front, front cover, okay? That's often the way it worked. Not saying he was crucified that way, because I don't know. What I'm giving you is the common way of doing it. What that means is that when we typically see these films where, like the one you saw on Wednesday, where he's raised up with the ropes and all that and dropped into a hole, probably not. Typically the way this would work is you would have the person who's being crucified attached to this cross member, laid on the ground, and then stood up, and then that would be lifted onto the top of the main beam like so. Then he's hanging at that point. Does that make sense? Okay. But part of that means that the person being crucified is typically not very far off the ground. It's not one of these things where you're looking up to get the perspective on what's happening. Again, I'm not saying that's exactly how it's done, because we don't know. But that's a typical way that it's done at the time. Yes, sir?
With that design, where would the sign have been put?
Well, I'll show you the cover here, and you can take a peek. They depict it here like that. Okay? That makes sense? This is Bill O'Reilly's book. I'm not necessarily recommending it. I'm not dissing it either. It's a decent text. It's a decent book. It's a popularly written work. I mentioned the other day. Just street level. It's not a bad source to go to. The problem is, don't take everything seriously. And the problem with that is, well, what do you not take seriously? So I'll leave you with that. But it's a good readable text in his Killing series. So, yes, sir.
In some translations, the stake is used. Is there very much verification? It doesn't seem to fit with Scripture. Exactly. Stake. One pole. And they crucified on that. I think Seventh-day Adventists, and there's 2 or 3 other translations that use a stake in there instead of cross.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you know any more about what he's talking about?
Because in ancient world, they often just impale people instead of crucifying them, so that's why. But it's a mistranslation. Poor translation.
Yeah, he's right. Sometimes there's not a cross, and sometimes he's just hanging on the pole. We'll talk about Nero here in just a bit. Nero would sometimes light up evening banquets in his outdoor courtyard. He would light up the banquets by having poles erected, the bodies of the Christians attached to them, doused with some sort of flammable liquid, and then set on fire. I don't know. I think that would put a damper on the evening. I was there.
Does he know for sure? Like, could handle it?
Yeah. We all think in terms of the nails in the hand, which would have been something similar to this.
Yes.
Typical 7-inch or so nail. Is this exactly how it was? Not necessarily, but this is the type that was used. Through the hand, that's fine. It does make it hard to hold the body up if that's the case. Probably typically it's done here between the bones. All right. So if it bothers you that his hands were pierced in Scripture. Okay, I don't know that you should worry about that, but again, that's just me. And again, do we know for certain? Well, that implies that every crucifixion is always done the same, and of course they're not. Those would have to vary regionally by all kinds of things. But that's going to be the way we usually do it. Because it's about holding weight is part of the problem.
Yeah.
Trying to hold it weight.
That's the finding of archaeology,
Yeah.
according to what I read
Yeah,
sometime
all the
ago.
archaeological
They
stuff
found a
is-
hand
is showing, yeah,
with
between
the
was it
spikes.
radius and all this, is that what we're talking about? I'm not smarter than a fifth grader, so I don't know. Okay? And you all know the pathology of this, just how what this does to the body, the pain, the shock, it's been pierced, you're bleeding out, it's excruciating pain, the breathing issues, and raise yourself up, get a breath because everything is pulling back on the chest, so it would just be an absolutely agonizing way to go. And as your film said, 3 days to die is not uncommon. Fortunately for Jesus, he did not take him there. Look, he's beaten to a bloody pulp. So it's rough stuff. Okay, let's look at, what about starts with the Pax Romana for you here. I'm a little bit behind, so I'm going to fly through a lot of stuff today because we only have a couple hours left. But anyway. Look, Augustus Caesar has come to the throne. Octavian has come to the throne. Gaius Octavianus, Octavian, is now Augustus Caesar. He is just littered with titles. This is a guy where we start getting the titles we think of. Caesar is already his family name. Remember, he is a great nephew, I believe, of Julius Caesar, so that comes automatically. You'll see here these other titles, things like Augustus. So Augustus Caesar. Augustus, by different translations, means various things. A good omen, royal provider, divine augmenter. This is the guy you're relying on, to the point. So Caesar, Augustus, the word imperator is given to him. That's our source word for what becomes the word emperor. Down the road, he's also given a title of princeps. Everybody was identified in Rome as all equals. And he's identified as the first among equals. Well, wait. You're either equal or you're not, I think. So the point is that, we're all the same, well, except me, but still, the rest of you are all the same. So kind of the number one sort of title here. So Augustus, Caesar, imperator. Princeps is the word that gives us our word prince later on. I refer to principality, ruler of principality, that kind of thing. Now, what starts with Augustus Caesar is a period in Roman history that is the most fantastic era for Rome. This is the era that is known as the Pax Romana, Roman peace. This is where Rome is hitting it on all cylinders. They're just flying along. It's tremendous stuff. It's not always great, but it's typically great. Things are good. Things are peaceful. There's a relative calm. The civil conflicts brought about by Julius Caesar's assassination, that's over. The smoke is cleared. And for the next almost 200 years, you get this run from Augustus Caesar, beginning at 14 BC, till we get to 180. That takes us through Marcus Aurelius. And just some fantastic stuff going on. Now, we don't always have good men here, but when we say good men, what does that mean? Well, good for Rome is not necessarily going to be a guy who is a good moral person. Good for Rome doesn't automatically translate into good for the church. Our perspective may be a little bit different when we say, was this a good Roman emperor? For Rome, yeah. For the church, not quite so much. Now, we're gonna lay out Augustus Caesar's reign here pretty quickly. You see on the text, the page here, just the fantastic stuff that's taking place. You have an empire of scope here. It's not the full size yet, but it's going to be here in a matter of decades. It's going to extend all the way from Britain to Portugal today, what was Lusitania then, all the way out to the Parthian Empire, which is the remnant of the old Persian Empire, I mean, this is a big empire. This stretches from Alaska to Florida. This is California to Maine. It covers almost the same territory in terms of the ultimate geography. So it is a big, big place. And again, it's going to be getting bigger in the next few decades. Look at the stuff. Look what he's doing here. The fact that he has occupied Egypt means he has access to all sorts of great stuff. One, grain fields. This is food pouring into Rome. The tons of grain they need just to feed people in the city of Rome is just absolutely fantastic. He takes the treasury from Egypt, removes the entire, just like taking all the banks, move them all to Rome. Boom. This is a big deal. There's so much gold and silver in Rome, the city of Rome, that you'll literally see street level interest rates dropping from 12% to 4%. Now take any interest rate you're attached to, car loan, house loan, cut it down to 1/3. Would your life be better? You bet it would. You know it would. This is a big deal. This is absolutely fantastic stuff. So good communication. Now look, when I say superb communication, by our standards, no. By the ancient world standards, yes. But look, there's a lot about this that stays the same too. I mean, Rome begins as a donkey cart, ship-bound world. It ends as a donkey cart, ship-bound world. There's not a lot that changes about that. What is going to change is the quality of roads. That's sort of communicating. And then the fact that they can communicate by ship. There's always pirates, but they can communicate by ship from port to port, and there's dozens and dozens and dozens of ports. And that's just an effective system that they create. Again, he's very concerned about his bureaucracy, honesty, taxes being collected fairly. He doesn't want cheats in his government. I mean, this is all good stuff, basically. Then in the section of good and bad emperors, excuse me, you're going to be saying, look at him in terms of his morality. He's a fairly straight arrow among Roman emperors, and we're going to see a lot of bent arrows that are coming up pretty quickly. But he's really a pretty straight guy. Now he may stray in his marriage contract from time to time. I'm not saying that's okay. I'm just saying compared to what we're going to look at, this guy's pure as the driven snow. Again, this kind of thing being relative to the time period. So again, a pretty moderate guy. He'll even pass laws because he's figuring out, look, if we don't get back to the old Roman values, we're going to lose the republic. And there's an irony in that because effectively he's already an emperor. He's just not willing to admit that. He's like Julius Caesar in that context. No, we need to hold on to the republic. Well, okay. I mean, he talks about doing things in terms of giving the Senate more power and again, just being more Republican-based in terms of the government. He never does it. But he is very cognizant of what he perceives as the decline of Rome in terms of its moral values. He sees things like sexual immorality. He actually will have the Senate pass laws about gambling and drinking and just being idle, just not even working, being on the public dole, those kinds of things. He's very concerned about that stuff. And what I'm calling here laws against sexual irregularities, we'll just leave it at that. He even addresses divorce differently. Now he doesn't, it's not a no-fault situation. It's still a lot of pressure on the women, but at least it's a little different than it was before this. And again, laws about luxury. Laws about how much you should have, how much you should eat, how much you should own, how much land you should have. You get a lot of land reform here, land handed off to the poor during the reign of Augustus Caesar. Look, he's also big on bread and circuses too, but again, there's fantastic things happening here. Again, compared to the guys you're going to be looking at, he's a joy. Now, he's going to be around for a pretty good run, from 14 BC, or from, I said 14, I didn't mean to say 14, but 26, 27 BC, till we get to 14 AD, which also tells us what about Jesus. He's born during the reign of Augustus Caesar. All right, he'll die during the reign of Tiberius. But after he's gone, we're going to see 4 descendants of his family line. These folks that we call the Julio-Claudians. And these are, I think, the guys that we typically think of when we think of Roman emperors who are absolutely corrupt. Corrupt and messed up, and the morality is scraping the floor, and just all the kinds of strange, crazy sexual activity that we can't even begin to grasp or understand why this is the kind of things that are going to be going on here. And some are better at it than others. But again, it's pretty crazy stuff. I don't want to dote on a lot of that, but I do want to kind of give a perspective here in terms of, okay, strange sexual behavior aside, are they good for Rome? Well, let's take a peek. We get Tiberius, following Augustus Caesar. Again, very conscientious, very capable, good administrator, good bureaucrat, does right, I think, by Rome. He's got his issues sexually, which we won't worry about here. I think the longer he lives, the more prone he is to just weird sexual stuff. There's a lot of it, by the way, where he doesn't even rule from Rome. He actually lives on the island of Capri. And on the island of Capri, his palace was constructed up on a high cliff, as I remember, about a 1,000-foot drop off the cliff. Capri is off the middle range coast of the west part of Italy. Okay, if I pointed, I'm in the wrong place, but about where the E is in Rome on your map. So on the west coast, over on the Tiberian seaside. Here, the stories are told, and again, when you read these histories of these people, you have to be very cautious because sometimes somebody may be writing after the fact and he's got a political axe to grind. So he may be over-describing things, and well, maybe it wasn't exactly that way. But he's credited with, and I always hate to tell these kinds of things, but trust me, I'm leaving a lot out. Okay? As far as just the excessive stuff, the stories are told that up in the palace, Capri, they would have regular orgies. He would have young men and women come in, perform sexual acts, and if it satisfied him, then they lived. If he didn't think that was worthy of his having watched, he throws them off the cliff. Good for Rome, but not somebody you want to spend any time with. Then Caligula, his grandnephew, absolutely insane. Comes to the throne fairly young, acts like a 2-year-old most of his reign. I want what I want when I want it. And again, the excesses here are just off the charts. He's nuts. I think he just becomes crazy. Makes his horse a consul. You're just thumbing your nose at everything the Republic laid out, everything the Republic established when you do that. Eventually, he's assassinated by his own palace guard, which should tell you, when your own palace guard kills you, you've probably gone a bit too far. These are the guys who are supposed to be watching after you, and instead it's a knife to the throat. Nephew of Tiberius, Claudius. Claudius is the one you saw in the film on Wednesday. The one that seemed to have the weird kind of nervous acting. He had a facial tic most of his life. He had a swallowing throat problem of some sort. He would have spasms from time to time. Just kind of a strange acting sort of guy. Again, good for Rome, I think. He's going to extend Rome further into Britain, fights the Celts, more citizenship to more folks within the empire. Gets messed up with the wrong woman. He will marry his niece, Agrippina. She's a piece of work. She is the mother of Nero. So Nero is his stepson. She will convince Claudius to make him the heir to the throne. Agrippina is just a real piece of cake. She's a real piece of work. She will have sex with anything that moves, including her son. This is where Rome is just into this strange twilight world of grotesque activity, privately, and some of it's public too, and yet the empire goes on. And again, the empire per se isn't always going to be struggling accordingly. Claudius will eventually, again according to some of the stories, be assassinated by his wife. She will poison him with mushrooms, which she will help him swallow because he always had that throat tic problem. She helps, according to the story, helps him swallow by teasing his throat with a feather. Well, that's nice, except a normal day that'd be very sweet. The fact that the mushrooms are poison means that she doesn't wish you well. That means her 16-year-old son, Nero, will come to the throne. Trust me, 16-year-olds should not do very much at all that requires real responsibility. But he's on the throne. And look, a part of our situation here with these guys like Claudius, Tiberius, Nero, Caligula, is that there are family connections here where people are trying to figure out, well, who's going to be the next emperor? Do you have the handout for the family here, the Julio-Claudian family? You got that chart here? The shorthand way of explaining what this is about, because eventually, Claudius is killed so that Nero can come to the throne. Nero is so concerned about somebody else in the family taking the throne from him, even his mother. He doesn't trust her, well, for obvious reasons. He has her killed. Look, when you've got this business of, you know this works, in kind of royal families, when there's potentially more than one person who can come to the throne within the family, then every other person is thinking, well, now why not me? Why not me? As I usually do, I didn't hold on to one of these things. Can I take a look at, yeah, literature on that? I just want you to see how this hammers out, because when you've got these folks who are inheriting within families, what that means is, as you look at the family lines, look at the number of people who are killed by enforced suicide, died mysteriously, poisoned, as with Claudius, assassinated, murdered, forcibly starved. These are people within their own families, which I think would make a Thanksgiving dinner with these folks very complicated. I mean, who are you going to sit by? Who do you trust? And no, I'll pass on the potatoes. Thank you very much, Agrippina. You know, thanks for the mushrooms, but no. Look, this is the wacky world that Rome is led by, where it's death and killing and nobody trusts anybody within your own family. Now, when we get here in just a bit to the good emperors, we're going to see it's not about family in that case. I think that makes a big difference. Again, you know about Nero already in terms of the extremes here. Look, I think Nero, by all accounts, starts out very well. He's really conscientious. He's trying to do a good job. He's trying to do right by Rome. But eventually he gets so messed up. He gets weird. He gets sexually weird. He just loses complete track of what he's supposed to do and doesn't care. It is during his reign that Rome will burn. There's the old story, of course, it was told at the time about fiddling, which would have been played in the lyre, but anyway, while Rome burned. He wasn't even in Rome when it was still on fire. He came into the city while it was on fire. He actually participated in what would be the equivalent of a bucket brigade. So he actually tries to help put out the fire. Now, on one level, he's okay with that because he's been wanting to kind of redo Rome anyway. Rome had a lot of slums, and that's a lot of what burned was the slum area. And then he rebuilds there and builds a gigantic palace. It's a huge, huge palace, the biggest palace to date in Rome. So it becomes very self-serving ultimately. He has his mother killed in 59 BC. He will kill his wife in an absolute rage of just sheer fury. He loses complete control. She is about 8 or so months pregnant. He will kick her to death. Now, these are the guys leading Rome. Does Rome just kind of chug on regardless? In a lot of ways, it does. You know, these palace intrigues and, crazy soap opera kinds of things going on in these palaces sometimes don't translate into this doesn't work well for Rome. Because Rome is so big, it's ultimately bigger than these guys. Again, persecution of Christians is extraordinary during Nero's reign. Paul is probably killed during Nero's reign. Peter is probably killed during Nero's reign, 64, 65, around in there. So, his impact on the church is going to be probably dramatic. Again, just about excess. Excess, weird. He doesn't go off in any military campaigns. It's just crazy stuff. He at one point decided, they're setting the menu for one of these big, huge banquets he liked to hold, and he thought it would be great for one of the courses to include hummingbird tongues. So he sends out an army, literally, an army, to go and collect hummingbird tongues. Now think about being a Roman soldier in that time period. And my job is to do what today? How many hummingbird tongues does it take to make a meal? I mean, how many would that be? How small would your fork have to be to... I mean, I just don't get that. And I guess they have a long time, but still. Again, that's just all about excess and weird stuff. And eventually they're going to turn on him. The Senate will just say, okay, that's enough, for Pete's sake. Then he will have his, he will commit suicide. He didn't commit his own suicide. You've got that series, by the way, of pictures here somewhere, coins, where you see the change in him physically. It's so dramatic. He is just so messed up at the end. By the way, he regretted killing his wife, kicking her to death, and he will, not too many years later, and this is just weird, strange, crazy stuff, he will come across, I forget how, a young man, whom he thought looked a lot like his former wife. He will take that young man, feminize him in as many ways as he can figure out to do, and turn that guy into his new wife. Again, that is just plain old strange. And morally off the charts. But that's the way it works. Again, eventually he'll be ordered to commit suicide. He can't do it himself. He'll have a, again about the story, he has a servant, he holds the knife to his throat, has the servant plunge it in for him. He can't make himself do it. And at the end he thought, oh, you've lost a great talent here. He thought he was a great musician, actor, all this kind of stuff. He even did gladiator stuff from time to time. Just a strange bird. Then we lose that line, thank goodness. But we don't get much of a better line with the next three. It's actually a father and two sons. Vespasian, there's going to be a small power struggle here for a bit. And Vespasian comes to the throne. Flavius, Vespasianus, everybody calls him Vespasian, always call him Vespasian. And then he will have two sons who will follow him on the throne, Titus and then Domitian. A lot of fantastic stuff happening here. Again, not great guys, not guys you want to spend any time with. But some really fascinating stuff taking place here in the history of Rome. One, the Colosseum gets constructed. What was called the Flavian Amphitheater. It's named after the family. The Flavian Amphitheater. Everybody calls it Colosseum. So colossal, so big. That's what it's referred to. So anytime we talk about gladiators part of this, there's not a Colosseum yet. Now there's going to be a lot of Colosseums. Because look, Rome will build cities all over the empire. Ultimately, Rome is going to build the equivalent of 1,000 cities. 600 of them in northern Africa alone. And they almost always have the same kinds of buildings. They're almost always done by the same design. There will almost always be a big amphitheater. Maybe not as big as the one in Rome, but still, if you want to see some really great examples of Roman amphitheater architecture, you go to northern Africa. The one in Rome is impressive, but it's a hollow shell. Well, literally, compared to what it used to look like. It's really hard to get a picture of what the Colosseum used to be. But anyway, what else do we get? Oh, we also get the siege of Jerusalem, 70 AD 70. That happens during his reign. The guy actually leading the army will be his son Titus, who becomes emperor later. And then in 72, we get the siege where? At Masada. Masada siege is in 72. That's also Titus, his number one son, who will lead the army in that siege. So these things are happening all within the reign of Vespasian, then his two sons that follow. Again, good for Rome. Hard, rough guys, not good for the church, not guys you want to spend any real time with. But again, decent for Rome. This is about growth, expansion, these kinds of things. Then we hit guys that are just going to be amazing for Rome, and fairly decent fellows on top of that. These guys here, what we call the philosopher kings. If you know your Plato, you remember from the Republic, who should run a republic? Who's the best model for a leader? A philosopher king. Someone who's very wise, who knows to make good decisions on behalf of the state, not on behalf of himself. But those are the kinds of, well, of course, with Plato, you got a guy like him, but anyway, with these guys, it's kind of the guys that we get. And you can see the laundry list here, there's a whole lot more we could put on in terms of what they're accomplishing, and so we'll just kind of fly through these fellows. But these guys from Nerva to Marcus Aurelius, and I'll kind of step back here so I can see it a little better. Nerva, land distribution to the poor. He gets rid of taxes. He gets tax breaks to some of these guys. Freed the Jews from some of their tribute payments. Education for poor children, which almost nobody had taken seriously prior to that. Very efficient in terms of running his, look, he wants to run Rome without waste and inefficiency. He wants to reduce budgets. He's Reagan. Trajan. He's still expanding out the empire over to the east. What becomes Romania. A lot of public works projects, new annexation, Armenia, Assyria, Mesopotamia, Parthia. Hang on, we're going to lose those here. One of these guys will follow. Money distributed. There's a lot of welfare taking place here. Look, if you were in Rome in this time period, somebody who is poor, doesn't have a job, just kind of hanging around, basically, Rome is handing out stuff left and right. They're handing out grain, they're handing out wine, they're handing out bacon, excuse me, almost on a daily basis. They're handing out cash. It's hard to translate numbers, but handing out maybe the equivalent of 20 to 30 bucks a day to people in Rome, just so they can function. So you have no job, no real purpose, nothing going on, but handouts, you're being fed, and you got some little hovel you're staying in, you spend your day off of the games, which will increasingly the number of days in terms of the games just keeps going up and up and up. You've got to keep these people from rioting. There's a lot of street stuff that always goes on here. You don't go out in Rome at night. There's a police force, but there's gang warfare in the streets of Rome. So it's not a comfortable place for a lot of folks. But as much as possible, they're being seen too. Now look, if you're handing out grain by the ton every day, you've got to keep that stuff coming in from someplace else. So it's no wonder they're all conquering some of these other places at the same time. We get Hadrian. Hadrian, amazing stuff here in terms of Roman art, new architecture, or I'm sorry, the Trajan, new architecture. Hadrian comes in. He did not like to go off on campaigns. He thought Rome was maybe too big. It cost us too much with the military to hold on to all these far-flung provinces. So where a guy like Trajan will bring in Armenia, Assyria, Mesopotamia, and Parthia, Hadrian gives independence to Armenia, Assyria, Mesopotamia, and Parthia. So let's make up our minds. But he just said, look, we're getting too big. We can't control it all. It's not possible. He is very much looking for corruption, run empire as well as we can. Off in Britain, he says we've got to establish a line between us and those crazy Scots. These are your people, probably.
Yeah.
A lot of you. They just found the Scots couldn't be controlled. Okay, fine. Let them go, let them do their thing, put up a wall, and make it clear. This is our side, that's your side, we'll stay out of your hair, you stay out of our hair. So Hadrian's Wall, some of you were talking the other day about having been to Hadrian's Wall, parts of it still exist, about 4 feet tall, a lot of it. It's not a wall designed to keep them out, it's a wall to delineate a border. Okay? You can step over the wall, you can knock the wall down in 2 seconds, but it's to mark the border. Here's a guy, Hadrian's fantastic in terms of actually traveling all over his empire and then doing like town halls. He would talk to people, regular folks, meet with people. He would listen to any complaint anybody had and basically say, I'll see what I can do. Now that is so far from a Nero, a Caligula, these kinds of guys who want what they want when they want it. They want to know, what do you need? And I think we all admire leaders like that. Rebuilt the Pantheon. It existed prior to him, but he built it to what it looks like today. That big, whatever it's called at the top, big hole, brings the light in. That's from his time period. Antoninus Pius. Pius is a nickname. He's so moral, the Senate calls him Pius. There would be very few senators that will make that, due to them. So pursuing the old Roman virtues. Again, these guys that connect, we've got to get back on the straight and narrow because we're not the people we used to be. If we keep monkeying around here, we're going to lose the whole bit. It's not a matter of let's just run it efficiently, effectively as we can. We've got to get back to the old values. Fidius, pietas, religio, gravitas, all these kinds of things that made the republic. We're going to get those things back. Equalizes penalties for adultery for men and women. Even when Augustus Caesar changed those things, it was still a lot on the women. It was still the women who really came out short of the stick. And he's going to say, that's not right. It takes two. So really some fantastic stuff. A lot of those changes don't stay in place, but still he meant well. Even changes some of that, through the Senate, changes some of the laws in terms of slaves being treated better. And you can't just beat your slave to death, not legally, any longer. Good support for the poor. It is so good under Antonius Pius, you're literally going to have other countries, other states, sending delegates to Rome saying, please, 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 can we come into your empire and be part of this too? Well, you know, maybe that's part of the answer. Maybe instead of sending armies off to defeat people who don't want to be in the empire, maybe that will make it look so good that somebody's thinking, hey, that's not a bad deal. Maybe we're going to get in on this. Maybe some real advantages to being a part of Rome, as there were at that time. Rights respected, people living largely free. I mean, it's just a good run. And then Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius is a philosopher by nature, a decent leader, I think, a Stoic. If you know your Greek philosophy, the Greek schools of philosophy, that takes you back to Plato, basically. Just live in moderation, pretty much. No nights. The contemplative life, those kinds of things. He takes that very seriously. He didn't surround himself with any kind of trappings of royalty. He dressed modestly in terms of just regular clothes. None of the royal purple stuff for him. He slept on the floor, on a straw mat. I mean, this is just a regular guy who's immigrant, who just does not think he needs much but the air that he breathes. You know, just things like that. So, really amazing guy in that respect. Now, not, you can see the last line, you can see it or not, but not good for Christians. He's not hardcore, I can't stand Christians, I hate what they do, but his perception was that some of the riots taking place, some of the revolts taking place during his reign were being caused by Christians. Generally, they were not, but he thought they were. So he comes down on Christians because he thinks they're causing political problems. Rising up and, you know, wielding the sword. They weren't, but he would still persecute them accordingly. So not good for Christians because I think he just misunderstands. Look, I think ultimately he'd like everybody to be like him, but wouldn't we all? Real fast here, let's look at kind of daily life. Just to kind of get a scene. I've drawn some of that for you already. But just because you lived in Rome didn't mean life is just hunky-dory. Again, you probably lived in a hovel, a lot of slums. There's a lot going on. No, that's the thing about Rome. There's a lot going on. A lot of the art, architecture, just fantastic things happening. Philosophers, artists, craftsmen, poets. The kind of Virgil kind of guy from time to time. These kinds of fellows. It's just an amazing world. It's a very cosmopolitan city, which Phil mentioned the other day, I think. Maybe nobody in this presentation. There's a lot of different kinds of people. Just this real ethnic, just really multicultural city. But again, a lot of slums, a lot of gangs. Still a world that's class-driven. Aristocrats at the top. You kind of have a viable middle class by now. Your artisans, craftsmen, these regular kinds of folks who actually have something to do. Guilds that they would function out of, called colleges. That's where we get our word college from, ultimately. These workers who are going to make sure that they all, of a certain craft, produce quality stuff. They don't undercut each other. The price is going to be the same. Those kinds of things. So it's really some good stuff happening. But then at the lower end of stuff is still going to be the slaves. This gigantic population of slaves. I think that's a huge factor in terms of the decline of Rome. Look, you've got maybe as many as 1 out of 3 people in Rome, the city of Rome, are slaves. So it doesn't matter what you do in terms of changing rights. I mean, there are some things that are done here in terms of, look, you can't just kill your slave because it's a bad day for you. Just because you're done with it, mad at it. But at the same time, the slaves just don't have the primitive rights. They never will. That's your labor force. It undercuts free labor in dramatic ways. It means you've got a lot of guys just sitting around because a lot of the labor is done by the slaves. So what are you going to do? You can't compete with that. So there's nothing going on. So you're going to take the welfare when it's offered. It's not a good system. It's one that ultimately will kill off Rome. A lot of games, a lot of distractions, things to keep people busy. And this is about the gladiatorial stuff. It's about different kinds of programs otherwise in places like the Coliseum. It's the Hippodrome, it's the Circus Maximus, the chariot races, all these kinds of things. Just a lot of that going on here. Again, just to keep people kind of busy. Look at the paragraph here about Circus Maximus. This big marble arena, chariot racing track, 600 yards by 200 yards. The stadium could hold 150,000 people. That's twice Memorial Stadium in Lincoln. It's a the architecture, the engineering these guys are pulling off is just extraordinary stuff. I mean, it's a lot of it's new too. Use of domes and things like that. That's being done more seriously with Rome than it was ever done prior to Rome. Can I do this real fast? We'll stop there. You can ask questions. I know I'm flying real fast.
So what are the soldiers doing now that they're not expanding and?
Well, a lot of that's garrison stuff, where they're on the borders. They're in places, as Noah said, where they've got to hold on to pieces of property. Just because you've conquered land X doesn't mean that land X is happy with that. There's always an element of intimidation. You collect tribute. Okay, you're going to have your presence there. And by the way, when we talk about the Roman borders, what I don't want you to get is a picture that that's a slender line of protection. It's not. We talk about the Roman borders, a lot of these places have become urbanized, there's cities, there's mines, there's farmlands that are being worked. There's a significant Roman presence on a lot of these border regions, especially in the Germans. There's just, and there's, of course, there's systems of watchtowers and garrison points and, all these kinds of things that Noah was talking about the other day. I mean, watchtowers along the border. Yeah, you want to come out and say anything about this? Where you can literally see from one watchtower to the next. There's a lot of that going on. But very significant presence along the borders.
Didn't get much into this the other day just because of time constraints, but specifically to your question, a lot of what they're doing is building, the roads. These men you had a lot of skilled men who had enlisted in the legions, surveyors, bricklayers, those kind of things. Where else is Rome going to get a labor force that is free? The legions. Who else do we have in that province who can build a road? Nobody. These guys. They build camps all the time. They can build roads, and they did. A lot of it is guard duty, escort duty, the grain convoys coming towards Rome. Those have to be guarded by somebody. It falls to the legionaries. A lot of that kind of work, just solidifying Rome's presence in a province that otherwise might not have much Roman presence aside from the military.
Anything else before we take a break here? Okay, I got 1 more hour to finish all this. Can I get you back in here by 5 after? Can we do that? 5 after, that gives you about 12 minutes before you're not clocked up here. All right?